We had multiple people leading up to this episode ask us, are you going to have a sex therapist on the podcast?
Okay.
And I said, yeah, you know what? I might be in contact with one. And I found one.
You did. And I'm happy. I'm excited. I feel like I got the memo too.
Oh, shit. It's just Chris. Eh?
That's a little beige. It's if we're checking hues.
Dark white?
It's a dark white.
Don't kill me. So I want to ask you something, actually, before we even get into it.
Okay.
As a therapist, you do your assessments on people, right?
Okay.
Cool. You write your notes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You probably didn't have a notepad, but you probably have mental notes. As you were sitting here listening to us pod, what are your notes on us?
I actually did write notes. They're over there. And one of the questions I had was you expressed that Chris is the most experienced because of age. And I just said, well, I don't know if Chris is the most experienced, but I feel like age doesn't necessarily equal experience.
We're getting into it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I meant like us as people.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I thought you saw my stat sheet.
Stat sheet is crazy. We were saying more because Chris is married.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
he's in the longest relationship out of all of us.
I still don't think that means that I don't know, once again, that he's the most experienced.
And do you say experience is more in terms of number of partners or in terms of number of experiences?
Okay, I like that question, but I like that question. I think that's an important question. I think it's what I'm alluding to here with Chris. I think partners doesn't mean that you are sexually experienced. There are a lot of people that are unhappy within their sexual experience. There's a big orgasm gap, right? So just because your list is long does not mean that you are experienced.
So what does experience mean? I'm saying this for someone who's not experienced.
Okay.
What would I do to get experience?
You would have to experience experiences. That's the only way I feel. Like, you can learn, and I feel like theory is very different than practical.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're saying it's not in terms of number of partners. So
No,
if
I don't
I
believe so.
find the one for me, I can still be well experienced with that one person.
For sure.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that everybody's going to like what that one person likes, but I think you can set like a foundation. And I think it's important personally to explore sexually.
I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Are we?
Yeah, let's start from the top.
All
here.
right, let's start from the top.
Let's let the people know what a sexual therapist is, because I didn't really know what it was. I read what it was, but I didn't even know what it was.
Okay, so it can vary, but I feel like for me and what I like to focus on in my practice is teaching people how to, one, maybe release some traumas or some negative connotations they have around sex. To teach people how to have better sexual experiences. So like learning the body, to be able to whether pleasure themselves, pleasure their partners. And I know a lot of sex therapists may also go into the aspect of, what am I looking for? Like sexual abuse, sexual assault. Like, I tend to stick away from that within my niche just because I like to explore the fun that sex is. It doesn't mean that I won't take on a client that has that, but if that's the main focus, I tend to stay away. So it depends. It varies.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is a good place for us to actually start is some misconceptions.
Okay.
Some myths about sex. And I guess, obviously you can't name names, but what are the most common myths that you encounter? Like someone's just talking about sex, whether like casually or in passing, and they say something that is a myth that you have to correct, kind of like the experience thing that we said with Chris.
Yeah, I think it depends on age, but one, that oral sex is safer, and it's not. You can get the same STIs, STDs that you can in your privates that you can orally. So I feel like a lot of people feel like oral sex is a safer route, and that's not necessarily true. Pull out and prayer is a safe method of contraception. It is not.
Oh, fuck.
Right. A lot of people prefer that, but it's not the safer method. And I'm glad your prayers are working so far.
I have one God and you don't play about me.
All right.
There you go.
That is a big one. What are some that you all hear? I'm trying to think of mine.
Okay, so all right, for me as a man, there's misconceptions that I notice a lot of younger men have about women and just like the vagina.
Okay, like what?
for a sexual experience, as a younger man, you might have the misconception that a pleasurable experience for the woman is the same pleasurable experience for you. So there might be a younger man that's having a sexual experience that is new to this. And while he is experiencing something with somebody, they're more so looking for their pleasure.
Oh, 1,000%.
And just assuming that that's the woman's pleasure. So I think that's a misconception that a lot of young men have.
Okay.
Is there one that you feel like there's a lot of young women have?
Can I piggyback off that a bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I do think porn plays a part in that. But also I find with women, and this might be a bit of a hot take, there is an orgasm gap for sure. I feel like that needs to be addressed.
What is an orgasm gap?
Well, women in heterosexual relationships receive the least amount of orgasms.
So different from a thigh gap.
Yes, definitely different from a thigh gap. But one that I want to address, particularly with women, is that because males are having orgasms does not mean that they're enjoying the sexual experience either. And that's why I talk about the relationship piece, where you can be with somebody long term and not be happy with the sex that you're having. But because, of course, you see that end results of ejaculation, women feel like, well, he got off. Yes, that's going to happen naturally if the movement of whatever, is taking place. But that doesn't mean that he enjoyed his sexual experience, like he's sexually satisfied.
No, he's just going through the motions, probably.
Exactly. Potentially, not all the time. But yes, I want to address that. Just because a man is coming does not mean that he's satisfied sexually.
That's very interesting. How do you kind of, I guess, quantify satisfaction without using the orgasm as the benchmark there? Because you said that someone can come without it them being satisfied.
For sure.
So how do you quantify satisfaction? And for anyone.
Yeah, well, personally, I check in with my partner. Like, I think that's so important. And a lot of the times, both, if we're saying genders, like, have a hard time having that conversation because they're fearful of hurting someone's feelings or shame. And so I think it's so important to communicate after sex during that period, where you guys should be giving each other like some care and some love. Hey, like, how did that feel? And there's a method that I love to use. It's like, it's blanking me. I feel like I'm on the spot.
Okay.
What did you enjoy? Sorry.
No, we got good lights here. So.
Yeah. What did you enjoy? Like, what is it? What is something that you like? It's stop, start, continue. What is something that you enjoyed that I did during the process that you'd like to continue? I feel like it's a very soft way to check in with your partner. What is something that I did that maybe you didn't really care for, so that I can stop doing it? And what is something you're interested in trying? That's the start.
I think that language is probably helpful in like comforting to have that conversation, because I do think communication. Now, of course, I'm not an expert. I'm just speaking from hearsay. I don't know anything about any of this.
Okay.
But I think communication is key in these situations. So
1,000%.
I think that that's a big part of it, especially the conversations you have beforehand. I think obviously afterwards is another conversation, but do you have any advice for language in terms of having a conversation beforehand?
I feel like that's a little tricky because some people aren't comfortable talking about sex beforehand. And when I say a lot of the time, that's women, because in many cases, men tend to jump into those conversations prior to somebody being ready. So I don't want to then tell you to go initiate this conversation. And
why do you think men are more comfortable to talk about sex as opposed to women, especially like with a new partner?
Okay, that's a valid question. And I don't know if I think it's the way that men are approaching women, maybe based on you saying like, what's the best way to introduce this conversation? And I feel like often men as quote unquote hunters, I think that societal perception and that society's like way of believing that men should act, men are then acting that way. And I don't necessarily think it's the right way to act, because yes, you want to ensure that a woman's comfortable and ready to have that. Both of you need to be ready to have that conversation.
Yeah, the phrase hunter just doesn't feel appropriate.
I agree.
But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And that's why the quotes, like, I don't think that should be a thing and that expectation should be on men. But unfortunately, societally it is. And men fall into that, I would say, trap. And then here we are. I'm feeling uncomfortable. This is happening.
Yeah. So due to that, you think that it is a long-standing double standard of women being comfortable to talk about sex, especially to men, because of whatever they feel like a man might think of it. sex is overall just a taboo topic, especially with women to be comfortable on public platforms to even talk about that. So
For sure.
do you think like that conversation's changed? A lot more women are comfortable just talking about sex in general?
I don't know. I don't know if it's changed. I don't think so, to be honest. I do think there's more openness because of social media and it's very accessible. But I don't know if women feel more comfortable talking about sex. I'm not sure with that one.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, as the married gentleman here,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any questions that you might want to ask Claudette?
I got a lot of questions.
Okay.
You know, we got to see what I feel comfortable asking.
That's valid.
That's funny.
I don't know. I guess one question could be, I think this is this is more of a question for like the people, like, you know, that long-term relationship that's been in there for a while. And maybe you want to spice things up. You know, maybe you want to respectfully talk about the experiences like you're saying. And maybe ways that you can add to those experiences. What's the best way for somebody to approach their partner to ask a question about maybe trying to implement something? They want to try something new. You know, maybe they saw something, they're like, oh, that could be cool.
For sure.
And they're like, how do you approach that in like a respectful way?
Oh, that's such a good question. And it obviously is going to depend on the partner and their level of openness. However, I'm not a fan of somebody not being able to express desire that they have. I also think if you're going to approach that with your partner, you have to be ready for either answer, because just because it's something you're hoping to try does not mean that your partner is going to be open to it. And I feel like the why behind that, like, okay, say your partner is willing to hear you out and they say, why is that? Because they may become self-conscious. Like, is it because I'm this or I'm that, or are you attracted to this person? Like, you know, there might be a lot of questions. So I think you have to be ready to reassure your partner in that moment as well, if you so do decide to take that step. But I'm all here for that. Like, I love hearing that people are open and wanting to spice it up or try new sexual experiences, because you can never learn everything about sex, which is why it's one of my favorite topics.
So are you still learning things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can be with one partner and they touch me a different way. And I'm like, oh, I like that. Like, that's not something I've experienced. And that's something I'm learning new. That's about me, right? I feel like you can always learn about sex.
I have a question, maybe a suggestion. Now, of course, I'm asking here as a novice, a beginner. Okay, so all you experts in the room, lead me down the right path.
I'll send you some notes.
Allegedly. My question is, do people ever bring up these kind of things in like a different way of correspondence? I think, of course, we always think about the face-to-face talk, maybe a FaceTime. While Chris was asking his question, I thought this would probably be the right thing to put into an email. Maybe you could add a link as well. But I think you can make the subject line something that's, you know, maybe a little not totally clear, you know, which way it is. They open the email, you have your instructions in there of something that you desire or want to do. You can put links in there, maybe some instructional videos as well. And I think that may be a maybe a different way to come about this. I know that's maybe unconventional. You guys tell me. Of course I wouldn't know. But what do you think about that in terms of approaching this conversation of trying something new and putting it in an email instead?
I think, again, that goes to knowing your partner, because if, like, I'm taking in that situation, if I was in it, I want my partner to talk to me. It's a level of connection that I feel like I would hope I've created a safe enough space for you to have. And so that in-person conversation would do well for me.
But you can schedule the convo through the email. Like, you know, like
Google Meets.
It can be like the gateway drug.
And I'm not saying it's a no. It's just, it depends on your partner.
But it doesn't have to end there, is what I'm saying. Like, that can just be like, now that you've read all the materials,
I'm calling you. I'm like, what? This is catching me off guard. What's going on?
So
like, you know?
Because I think too, it's almost like sometimes when you have certain convos, so I've heard, is that people have certain connotations about certain things.
For sure.
So you may bring something up and they go, ooh, or I heard that's, you know, and maybe it's like the way you explain it or the way you approach it, you know, that gives it a certain feel. So I'm just trying to offer up new things here. Of course,
and there's no one right way.
I'm saving it for the one before the one, so I'm not really sure myself. But I'm just taking information from you guys and trying to offer up some different solutions.
I think we get it, Adriel. This guy's trying to reaffirm to somebody out there that he is a beginner.
Teach him.
And I don't think there's one right
I'm here to
way.
learn.
And I think that's also based on what you're describing and being a beginner, allegedly, and like wanting to learn. That is there protection in that for you? That you don't have to see your partner's immediate reaction, immediate response, and it gives you that a bit of a break. And screens help us protect ourselves or hide in a bit so that we don't have to face the confrontation head on, right? So it depends on you. It depends on your partner. And if that works for you, you're still opening the door of discussion.
Yeah, I feel like that might. I feel like it might be kind of wild. Like your wife or girlfriend opens up her computer at work, goes under email, opens the link, it's just a video of like something like.
Yeah, it's a little too much.
Yo.
You know, but I like where his head's at. To me, pause.
Listen, I'm
Spicing it up.
Yeah.
No, I thought that was a good question in terms of like a long-term like thing and trying something new, because I think communication to me is like the crux of all of this.
Mhm.
And my question to you is about like non-sexual intimacy. Like
Okay.
what you can do to like feel closer to someone without it being sexual. Like
For sure.
is there anything that you suggest or anything that you've heard that you think works?
Well, conversation is a great starting place. Like, I feel like sometimes even putting away the devices and just really being mindful and connecting within that moment with each other. So I think conversation is a good one. Touch, holding hands, that doesn't have to be necessarily sexual in nature, but for those who are physical touch people, going into your partner's love language, I feel like can be
Mhm.
something that's very big in terms of connection. Like, it doesn't, foreplay starts way before, like the actual acts of what we believe to be our foreplay. And so I love that you said that because that's really important.
I can't believe we made it this far into this part of the podcast without mentioning love languages. I think that's like almost an accomplishment. Can we give each other a hand, please? Like, made it this far without mentioning love languages. That's
I'm
pretty,
also glad
impressive.
that I'm here for episode 69. I love that.
Yeah. It's funny how
So random.
my Lord doesn't play about me.
My Lord
Yeah, crazy.
doesn't.
I had a question earlier just
Yeah.
about like, I talked a little bit about male misconceptions. Was there any misconceptions that you had like when you were beginning like your sexual journey
Mm-hmm.
that you now have learned?
I feel like the one that did I think that I didn't actually? Because my mom's a nurse, so I feel like I have a lot of benefits and advantages. She was very okay to talk about sex, and like I don't know if she was okay, but I brought it to her when I felt like I was in that place that I was ready, and she was like, okay, let's have a seat, and like so we were able to have that conversation openly, which I'm really happy about.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Are you Caribbean?
I'm Jamaican.
Wow, to have a
Mhm.
Jamaican mother that's comfortable to talk about them.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And I know how privileged I am.
My mom still thinks I'm a virgin.
OMG.
I'm not gonna give her anything to think I'm not.
No, literally.
Why?
I don't know. Like it's just
You're talking about sex being taboo and you're continuing that cycle.
100%.
Why?
You're part of the problem.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
And I accept that.
Listen.
Accountability is a skill that a lot of people don't have, but I do.
That's valid.
No, you know what? Ralph brought up a good point, because I think we hadn't mentioned it all, but in terms of like actually growing up in like Caribbean or immigrant households where it's
Mhm.
so taboo to talk about, because
For sure.
I get what you're saying where, I had an ex sleepover at my parents' place. And my mom was like, she got to sleep in the guest room.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself, like, you're a little too late to be trying to have us sleep in separate beds.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like part of the culture.
For sure.
Do you have any suggestions for anyone who's tackling that, who's listening, who it's like, they're in a household or an environment where it's so taboo to even talk about dating and sex at all, but the taboo part of it is kind of creating obstacles in their relationship?
Okay. First, is that X the one before the one?
Definitely not the one. So
So is the next one the
it's the one before the one.
one?
before the one.
And he's a beginner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Allegedly, right? Allegedly.
No, we held hands a lot.
Bible study?
Of course.
Love that.
Wednesday.
Wednesday and Saturday. Let's get it.
Guy's a big soaker. I don't know.
I wouldn't dream of it.
That's too far. I'd be probably.
Taboo. I think you just have to take that step. You are not to make it, about how old are you? If you don't mind me asking.
I'm 30. Well, I'm gonna be 32 in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, February 4th.
Okay, so you're about to be 32, and I don't know, I'm assuming the people that you're referring to are of adult age as well.
I'm gonna speak hypothetically.
Okay.
I don't know that we have any listeners who are not adults,
Okay.
so I'm assuming all our listeners are adults.
Yeah, it's just about ripping the Band-Aid off. Like, what are your parents gonna do? Your parents were also once children. They were once your age.
If you have
They were
Jamaican
once-
parents,
I do have Jamaican
Okay,
parents.
so here's my thing.
what they're gonna do?
They're not gonna do that at 32.
I have an interesting experience for me because
Okay.
same thing with Adriel. Like our parents were very sheltered in terms of that conversation. So the issue with that is they're raising us in North America. Like
For
we
sure.
have completely different experience.
1,000%.
We're probably going to tackle sex a lot differently than they did. So for my mom to sit back and think, okay, Ralph is probably just not really, dating too much or having too much sex, and then turn around and my brother brings a baby and she's a grandmother all of a sudden, those conversations weren't had.
For sure.
So I think that's the repercussions of a lot of things.
But may I ask you, why do you think, because you're in North America, they're tackling sex differently than you did?
They have a different experience growing up than we did.
What makes you think that? You hear dancehall, like this is not new. What makes you think that they had a different experience?
The multiculturalism within Toronto,
For sure.
how we're structured, how our government's structured, how our day-to-day structure is completely different from a lot of parents that grew up in Jamaica.
1,000%. But
Especially, sorry to cut you.
no, I
But
apologize.
there's a lot of, no need to apologize,
No, I
Claudy.
cut you off.
No, Claudy.
You just talked about accountability. I'm holding myself accountable.
I'm so accountable. It's crazy. No, like, especially growing up in like the 80s and stuff in Jamaica, it's completely different lived experience than we had.
For sure. Lived experience. But I think people often take out the fact that our parents are still humans. They were once teens with the same hormones. Like, they had the same experiences, whether they were doing it themselves or they heard people doing it or their friends were doing it. Sex is, I would like to say a lot of the times, universal, not in terms of the openness to it, but we're going through a lot of the same biological things. So as much as we think our parents didn't have the same experience, they definitely did. I know you feel like mommy maybe was, little angel. We'd all like to think that about our moms, but no, they had their experience, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I think about the cousins or family friends I have who they're still close with my mom, but their kids are like 15 years older than I am. You know? And my mom had me when she was 28. So if I'm doing the math.
Or like our grandmothers having 8-9 kids.
You know what I mean?
Starting
So
at like
it's like
19.
it's like if your mom or your dad or whoever, and it's like they have a friend that had a kid when they were 18, it's like maybe they didn't have sex themselves, but they had to like do the math of like, okay, my best friend is a father now, or my best friend is a mother now.
Or the high school that I went to, or the kids in my community, or like, I don't think they are out of the experience. And a lot of Caribbean and Black parents, do as I say, not as I do. So I think sometimes we have to remember they're human as well, and they weren't always the age that they are now.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like parents too. I'm not a parent, but I'm assuming it's probably hard when it's your kid and you've raised them and they're like, that was my little baby, and now they're going on to this. Maybe they had good or bad experiences when they were younger and they're like, okay, I don't want them, and every parent I think wants like that, like storybook, that nice, everything's packaged and clean cut, but nothing in life is ever packaged.
And I think the uncomfortableness too is if the switch of gender, like if I as a father, it's tough for me to tell that to my baby girl, you know what I mean? Or as a mother, how do you really speak to your 13-year-old son about practicing safe sex? You can do it, but it's tougher.
For sure. And then there's also, though, statistically proven that when we talk to children and kids about sex, they make safer sexual decisions. So the absence of that conversation, I feel like it impacts so much because now they have the education. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to have sex, but it means if they choose to have sex, they're likely to make a safer sexual decision.
If you like that video or any other Mayor Media video, please be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and stay tuned if you want to see more.